Hello folks. So in this video I wanted to talk about good code and bad code. I mean the high level definition I have for good code is two things, actually three things. One is it should have tests. The other thing is it should be readable. The other thing is it should be maintainable. So usually if it's readable and if it has tests, it should be maintainable. It should be easy to maintain and make changes. So today in this video, I'm just going to show you some code that looks bad. Other than these three things, there are some code that you can call it as bad. Apart from these, let's say even these are there, even if it's readable to some extent, in some ways it can be bad, and if it's not readable, surely it's bad. So in the current scenario, I'm showing a code which does not have tests. I'm sorry, yes, it's bad. It's very bad. So this is actually a script which we created for one-time usage. So it's a one-time use and throw script. But then of course, it's never true that you use it only once and just don't use it again. Because if that was the case, you wouldn't even keep it, in a file and whatnot. You would delete it off and you'll just walk away, but you don't delete it, and you keep reusing it at some point again and again. So I think one thing I've learned over the years is that no matter how many times you say it's a use and throw scrap code or whatever, usually it'll be used again at some point, or at least it'll be used to understand what was done, right? So this is a code that one of my colleagues wrote. So I made changes later to it. I'll show you how it looked initially when he gave it to me. Just a minute. Um, do I have it here? Let me get it. Just a moment. Oops, just a minute. This is actually related to uptime, Kuma, and sts monitor dot python, and just a minute. Okay, hello folks. So this is the code that my colleague gave to me. So basically it's a one-time use code. So this is to add monitors in Uptime Kuma, which is a software, and monitor is actually an entity in that software. Similar to adding users to a system, it is adding this resource called monitor using the Uptime Kuma API, which is actually a socket API and not a HTTP API. So based on WebSockets. So the thing is here we're using a Python code, so it's supposed to be a scrap code, throwaway code. So we actually don't need threads because I don't think we use threads anywhere here. So this was the first thing. We don't use threads anywhere, but it was written over here. It was imported for no reason. So this is one thing you can actually say that it's not great. Let me actually write this. Better uptime Kuma add sts monitor.py. Right now, if I just copy this and put this here, better code, you would remove this, right? And then import. Okay. The next thing is here they have commented out some code. It's okay to comment on code because in this case they wanted to reuse here and there and comment out things that they don't want to run. For example, this has been commented out so that this information is not used up anywhere because they iterate through this. And it's called URL prefix mapping. And the prefix is called incrm here. This is a prefix, yes, which we check for later in a word. We see if that word has this prefix. But this prefix is also an environment name. So IN, Asia, SG are all environment names. CRM is just to say that it's our product, CRM product. So the naming is not great, right? And then they put the sensitive data over here. I've actually removed it. They could have used environment variables, but it's okay. It's fine. It's a throwaway script, so it's okay. These are some of the things, and the naming is not that great, but it's fine. Instead of URL prefix, they could have said mapping in general. Yes, that makes sense. Or don't have to say it's a map because you can see the data, but it's a Python and you can't see data type just like that. So it's okay. You can say mapping if you want. URL, no need to say, just URL prefix. This is to actually find out all the stateful sets in the Kubernetes cluster using the Prometheus PromQL language by querying Prometheus and getting all the stateful set data and checking out what and all stateful sets are running in that Kubernetes cluster. So you could have written it as maybe stateful set information or stateful set information URL mapping or stateful set information mapping, just to get the stateful set information right. And then these are some filter conditions that they use to do some filtering on the stateful sets. Here the prefix and forbidden string is there. Okay, this is fine because we do actually check if this prefix is there, and this forbidden string is basically this substring should not be present, and if it's present, you should not consider it. So then you can actually see for loops, and you can actually see if statements that are pretty big, right? For example, just a minute. That's weird. When I just clicked open. For example, this whole for loop, most of it, if you see, it'll be actually this if statement. This if statement is so big. Ideally, you don't want such big blocks as much as possible. If you're saying that if the data is there in data and if the result is there, basically they're doing some checks, which is good. Basically, they're ensuring that this key is available in this map, and then they're ensuring that this key is available in this submap, and then they're doing checks, right? Ideally, what you could do is you can just say not, and then say if it's not there, then continue, right? Could have just said continue, and it would have gone to the next one, and this you could have put it outside, right? So now this is actually a very small if statement. If this is not in this, then this will be true, as in this will be false, and false will be false, and not of false is true, right? So now you make your if statements small, right? And then the next thing is, again, there's a very big if here. So it says if it starts with, then do all this. Then you can just say something like, you can put this in here, and you can say something like not, and then say just continue, right? So if it starts with, you do all this. If it does not start with, you just continue, and then you do other stuff now here, right? So same thing over here. If it's a valid substring, you do all this. If it's not, then you just continue, I would say. So you can actually inverse your if statements so that they're actually not very big, right? So this is a better way to go about it, because if you don't invert your if statements, they'll just be long. Like you'll write if, let's say JavaScript, you'll write if something, you'll have a very big line, like you'll have a lot of lines, and you'll have else also below it. The else will be so small. If else will just be one line. You could rather just invert it and say if not of something. Here it's 1, 2, let's say this is the thing that you want, let's say 3, 4 lines, 5 lines, 6 lines, 7 lines. This is just one line. You can just invert this and say that if not of something, then 8. Right? And then else this. Even then, if it's too big, what you can do is you can just return it off. You can just stop the execution over here, right? Or if you don't want to do that, then you can actually think about how to use, say, your other program structures like switch statement and whatnot. And you can also think about using interfaces so that if something is this, then it will use that. Accordingly, that interface and the implementation behind that interface will be run. And if it's something else, then that will be run. So you can use interfaces and whatnot. You can structure things like that also. But I would say invert your if statements, because if you have long if statements, then you can just invert it off and do something like this, right? So if you have a long if statement, in this case long if body, then make it smaller, especially in these cases where after that there's nothing else to do and it's a for loop, so you can just break it off. You can just invert it and break it off over here. So here you can see I inverted it and broke it instead of having a very big statement. It's better, it's easier to read, it's better code because the cognitive overhead or basically the amount of thinking you need to do while reading is not much, because when you look at this, it's pretty long. There's a lot of code under this if statement. But let's say this is not true, right? So now you want to jump off after that. Now you have to understand that this if is so long and then go through it. But if it were here, you would have just seen that this if statement is true, and hence you just can continue. You just be like, okay, that's the end. You can just go on to the next iteration, right? So it's easier to just read through, and if there is a early cutoff that can be done, just do it. So early, this is called early return, early cutoff, or early breaking, right? And it's easier to read through when you do this. And the naming, of course, has to be changed. It shouldn't be like prefix and all that. Ideally, it should be something like, stateful set info mapping, right? So that you can actually read through and understand. Auth prefix is kind of fine, so that's fine. And this is Python, so you'll use camel case, so that's all fine, right? And the next thing I saw is basically in bad code, the one thing you can see is sometimes people just use data inside a map just like that without checking if it exists. This one here they've checked it actually, but here they didn't check it, if you notice. Here they've checked it, this data and result. Here they didn't check it, right? Here they assume if it's not there, then accordingly they manage it. So that's also there, that's good. So basically it's important to actually do checks when you're working with maps or objects, right? So where you have a key and value, look if the key exists before accessing the key. The same is true for arrays. If you're looking for an index, look if the index exists, if the index will exist, or like you can access the index. So which means if the index exists, which means if the length of the array is that big, right? For example, here in one of the cases, and also this is all magic numbers, you won't understand what this is. What is this? This is basically actually an entity which is called a group monitoring uptime Kuma, the software, and this is actually the parent group, right? So you need to say that this is the parent group which represents the Redis group of Redises. So, and this can be put in an environment variable so that you can keep changing it for different uptime Kuma instances. It can be different, right? So I actually made these changes over here, so you can actually see some of this. For example, okay, URL prefix mapping, I didn't change it, I'm sorry. Here I did change it in my I actually rewrote this in JavaScript. Custom create or update. Yeah. So here you can actually see that I've written it as deployment info for this is for deployments, it's not for stateful sets, deployments labels and all that. So, and then I call it as env because it's an environment and all that, right? And you can actually see that I'm doing some try stuff here. This I didn't like it that much because I had to define a thing here and then use it here, and if there's an error then come out. I think finally would have helped anyways, and I didn't actually put this inside the same try catch. I could have done that. I am not really a fan of try catch actually. I love Golang's error returning mechanism where you return the error and then you can handle it. I'm not really a fan of try catch and finally and whatnot. Anyway, so and here you can actually see, okay, I haven't inverted this if statement. This is my bad. This is my mistake. But I have inverted one of the if statements. Here you can see this if statement is small. Instead of writing this, if it starts with and then give all of this, I have inverted some of the if statements over here. You can see over here, and I have done breaks and whatnot, right? So yeah, I mean you can try to invert if statements as much as possible if the if body is too big. And the next thing is, these I put it as like environment variables, right? So this you can see even in the Python. I put it as environment variables, sensitive information and information that can change across environments and all that, or across instances of uptime Kuma and all. And the naming is also appropriate. Here, this is the status of the deployment. So status info, I put it as that. There is just the deployment metadata info. So I could have put it as metadata info instead of deployment info anyways. So you can also see that I inverted the if again. So here, if you notice, no information found for environment is put here itself, right? Processing your deployment. So the interesting thing over here is, you say that over here such a big if, and then the else is so small, right? And then after the else there's nothing else to do, you just go on to the next one. So instead you could have just inverted this if, and that's what I did over here. So I inverted the if and I continued and said no information found for environment. So it says no information found for prefix. It's actually prefix and environment, and especially in environment, which comes as a prefix in one of the things. So yeah. So same way, like, a lot of other small things, naming and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted to say, that it's important to avoid code that is adding on to your cognitive overhead, and it's an overload of thinking. Instead, make it easier to read and think and process the code by having smaller blocks of code. Even this is bad actually. You should convert this into functions, multiple small functions. You should store this data separately so that you can get in the data from other files. It should not be one such big file which has like 460 lines of code. No. Every function should have just 5-10 lines of code. I'll write better code next time and I'll show you how it looks like. And I've actually done some crazy magic and all, which doesn't make sense, so it's harder to read through also, this one. And this is not easy to read through, but it's a bit better than before, readable and also to some extent understandable, and it works fine. So yeah, and the other thing is, tests. This does not have tests, so that's very bad. I was testing it by just manually running it, so manual testing. Ideally you should have tests that can automatically test it, so it should be automated testing, not manual testing. So, and I have had a lot of code duplication. So if you notice, I actually had 2 files over here. So I actually removed the duplicate scripts. I had one for create, so this was for create, and then create for so I had one for create, one for update, right? One for create and another for create and update. So that was unnecessary because one of them was doing create, another one was doing create and update. Ideally what you could do is just merge the two and just use create and update, and maybe have a mechanism to avoid the update or avoid the create whenever you don't want one of them. So have some if statement, some environment variable to choose one of them or both of them and all that. So I was actually looking through the code and trying to match both the code, the create code and then the create and update code. I was matching most of the things and then making extra changes only for the update, because update is there only in one of the scripts, but create is there in both. So whenever I made a change in one of them, I made a change in another. Then I was like, wait, why am I wasting so much time? I just wasted too much time. I was not thinking straight, and I just went ahead and then I just deleted one of them because I didn't want to maintain it. I was just going ahead, and though this is throwaway, you keep saying it, but I didn't want it to be throwaway exactly. I was like, I will store all the comments and I will check if it is good enough, so that we would require this automation and script to maintain our uptime Kuma stuff, related stuff. So I thought, why not just maintain it properly? So I removed duplicate code, duplicate scripts, and I just merged them. And if I lose some data, it's fine. I can go back to the old commit and find out what I lost and all that. So, and yeah, currently there is one more duplication, which is just a minute. There's one more duplication, which is deployments monitor and stateful set monitor are separate scripts. So here you can actually see create or update Kubernetes stateful set, and then here you see create or update deployment monitors. So I mean these two are basically almost the same thing. They do almost the same stuff, except that the data is different, a bit different. For example, here it says Kubernetes kube deployment labels. Here it says kube stateful set labels, right? And the data over here is different. This filter conditions, and that's it. Everything else is the same. And oh yeah, here also the URL is different, but these are all the same. I mean, not the same. This is one set. This is one more set. There's one more set over here. So the data can be merged also, but this URL is actually different. This template is different. Only this part, actually not this part. This part, the query of the Prometheus, right? So this is still a lot of duplicate code that you can actually merge through and ensure that you can easily just manage them because you're still doing the add monitor and edit monitor, the same thing. So the code is over here if you want to check it out. Code is in Karpia 990 Uptime Kuma tools, not Uptime Kuma API. So here's the code, you can go check it out. It's in the Python thing under v2. So it says this. So you can check it out. I created it against Python 3.13. I think the latest is 3.14 now. Download. Yeah, it's 3.14 is the latest, right? So depending on what you have, just make the changes or else just remove this requires and you can just go ahead. I don't know if this package specifically requires any version. Gotta check. Lucas pip. So I think it requires, okay, so this supports only till this much, I think, supported uptime versions and all that. So, and what is the API Python thing? So 3.7 plus is required. So apparently you require 3.7 plus. So if it's lesser than that, it's a problem. Configure Ansible. The Ansible correction can be found here. Interesting. So they use it with Ansible. So interesting stuff. So following modules are available. Tag info. Yes. So looks like they've used it along with Ansible stuff. I don't know how this works, but pretty cool stuff because they've tried to automate things. But yeah, I think there can be better software than Uptime Kuma. I mean, there can be better versions of Uptime Kuma because I didn't find it that great. But then, I mean, as of now, it's good enough. It can't be perfect. It can be better, yes. Let me wonder if I can actually build a better version. So yeah, I mean that's the thing about good code and bad code that I wanted to talk about. So that's all I had for this video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.